So there are two-stroke engines and there are four-stroke engines. What's the difference? So up on the bench we have a four-stroke and a two-stroke motor. One of each. This is a four-stroke engine from a lawnmower, Briggs & Stratton. It's pretty torn down. Obviously the crankcase cover's off, the head's off, tons of other pieces are off. Just to give you some reference, this is that same engine. Obviously you can see it's a bit bigger. So this is the same four-stroke as that. This is a two-stroke from an old McCullough chainsaw. It was a pretty small chainsaw to start, but now we have a two-stroke and a four-stroke. So all engines have the same main four components. They have the cylinder, the piston, the connecting rod, and the crankshaft. And that's really all you need for a two-stroke. Those are the main components. When we're talking about a four-stroke, there will be extra parts. Camshaft and the valves. That's the main stuff. There's also different parts that connect all that together, and an oil slinger down here in the bottom. Four-strokes are bigger because they need more space. If you have more parts, you're going to need more space. Another thing is that we have to divide the oil and the gas and separate them from each other. Like I said, there was an oil slinger, which we'll talk about down the road. We don't need to know much about them right now. But that lives down here attached to the camshaft. And underneath here, seeing this, all this empty real estate, there's oil. If you were to look at the two-stroke, obviously this is just going to be a smaller engine anyways. But you see that curve down here? How it's not boxy like it is on the four-stroke? That's because in a two-stroke, you don't need to separate the gas and the oil. Since in a four-stroke, we separate gas and oil, we don't want them to mix together. This can only be run in one orientation. This is a lawnmower. This is where you mount the blade, so it only works like that. A two-stroke, we mix the gas and the oil so it can run in any orientation. Like I said, this is from a chainsaw, so you want to be able to move your chainsaw around to cut different branches. This could be the same if you had a leaf blower that was a two-stroke, or a string trimmer with a weed whacker. You want that to be a two-stroke so you can move that around. If you were limited to holding it in one orientation, you can't do as much yard work with it. It's also heavier, so you don't want to carry that around. When I say that the gasoline and the oil are mixed, there's a special oil for it. This is called 4-cycle small engine oil, and this is 2-cycle oil. This is oil that it's more similar to what you could have in your car. It's not car oil, but it's more similar to that. This 2-cycle oil gets mixed with gasoline. This is why you never want to run a two-stroke on just gasoline, and you never want to run a four-stroke on the fuel that you've made for your two-stroke. This just happens to be steel, but any brand would make the same stuff. You mix one of these with 1 gallon of gas, and then that goes into your two-stroke engine. Since it's all mixed together, we're able to combine a couple of the steps that would normally be separate in the four-stroke. The fuel and the oil are mixed together, and it makes this work in any orientation. But when I say that there's different strokes that are combined, how does that work? Why is this a two-stroke, and why is that a four-stroke? If they run on the same 4 steps, intake, compression, power, and exhaust, what's the difference in that?
What makes it a two-stroke and what makes it a four-stroke engine, right? Where's the big difference? So the stages of an internal combustion engine are still the same. There's still intake, compression, power, and exhaust in that order for both two-stroke and four-stroke engines. You notice I called it a stage because I want to redefine what a stroke is for this. When you think about the piston traveling from one end of the cylinder to the other, that is a stroke. So the piston starts up by the top, and then it travels down to the bottom. That's one stroke. So in a 4-stroke, that's pretty simple. All the stages are separate. All right, so there's 4 strokes of the piston moving up and down. We're in power, and then exhaust moves up. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Everything's separate, and it moves right along. You'll also notice that since there's 4 strokes, there are 2 rotations per cycle. The crankshaft moves around twice, 2 rotations per the 4 stages. Also, the valves are operated by the camshaft, and those open up depending on where this is rotating. The valves open up the intake and the exhaust. That's a 4-stroke engine. A 2-stroke engine, things start to get a little bit weird. Intake and compression stages are combined, and the combustion and the exhaust stage are combined. There's only 1 rotation per cycle, and it uses a different type of valve. So let's start with the valve, because that's the intake valve. Here it's a reed valve. A reed valve similar to a saxophone or some other wind instruments. It works on pressure differences. So when the piston is on the compression stroke, you can see it moving up, that valve also opens, and it has an intake at the same time. So the intake of the air-fuel mixture and the piston compressing that air-fuel mixture up top in the cylinder happens at the same time. Then the piston moves down. So that's 1 stroke. The 2nd stroke, the piston has combustion, and it moves down. As it moves down, you can see that the piston opens up the exhaust valve. The piston itself is the exhaust valve. It also allows some of the air-fuel mixture from the crankcase to enter into the cylinder to be combusted. So here you see it's 2 strokes, up and down. 1 and 2. Intake compression, combustion exhaust. Intake compression, combustion exhaust. Intake compression, power and exhaust. So it's only 2 strokes. There's still 4 stages, but only 2 strokes. So when you look at the 2 of them next to each other, 4-stroke on the left, 2-stroke on the right, you can really see how there's 4 specific strokes of that piston in 1 cycle. The valves are opening up and staying closed. Over here, since there's just 1 reed valve on the right, and then the actual piston is the exhaust valve, there's only 2 strokes.
So that's the main difference between a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke. A 4-stroke, the 4 stages of the internal combustion engine, intake, compression, power, and exhaust, are all separate. We see that as the piston moves from one side of the cylinder to the other in 1 full stroke. So intake, compression, power, and exhaust. On a 4-stroke, we combine them. The intake and compression stroke are 1, and then the power and the exhaust stroke are 2. We use 2-strokes and 4-strokes in a lot of different applications, depending on what we want out of the engine. 2-stroke, remember, you can use this in any orientation you want because the gas and the oil are mixed. 4-stroke, we can't do that. But we usually get more power out of a 4-stroke, and it burns a little bit cleaner. So there are different uses for different applications. But remember that this is a 4-stroke because the piston travels 4 times through the cylinder, 2, 3, 4 in 1 cycle. In a 2-stroke, it only travels twice in 1 cycle, 1 and 2. So that's the difference between a 2-stroke engine and a 4-stroke engine.